Hey folks, it's Kevin Keinert from GameRoomRepair.com, and I was fortunate enough to do a full restoration on both of these machines at the same time. So in doing so, I noticed that there are a number of differences, not only the obvious ones to the case, but the internal mechanisms has differences. So if you're ever holding on to a part and you don't know which game it goes to, or if you find something you want to know, does it belong in the original All-American baseball machine that was made between 1929 and roughly 34, or does this part or mechanism go to a 1937 Rockola World Series? And Rockola did have some differences in their production as they went through making their games, so I'll try to cover a couple of those differences. And I am in no way a historian or do I know everything about all the differences in all the machines that were ever produced. So this video is going to show you just the differences that I found between these two specific machines. Hope you enjoy, and thanks for watching. The All-American baseball game was made by the Amusement Machine Company. And the obvious difference here is the larger ornate case with the book match pattern front panel. So to get to this mechanism, the door comes pivoting out and then lifts off. There's two posts that it's resting on, and then the front door, unlock it on both sides, it comes out, and you've exposed the entire front side of the mechanism so that you can unbolt it and pull it out if you need to. Now, when you pull out the mechanism, the grandstands or the backdrop stay in place. The grandstands, or this backdrop, is mounted with some screws up the side, one screw in the back, but it's not mounted to the play field itself. So you pull out the mech and the grandstands stay in place. To get to the back side of the mech to do servicing without pulling it from the case, there is an access door here, and that's in line with the whole back of the mechanism. Now that varies from the Rockola 1937 World Series in the aspect that you have a front door here that opens up and a lid that props open, and then that allows you to get to the front of the mech, but you cannot pull the mechanism outwards from the front. To do that, or to pull out the mech, you need to remove the back door. This is a very large door. The whole thing comes out, exposes the whole back side. You unbolt and slide the mech out backwards. And then there's the obvious difference between the marquee on the All-American versus the marquee on the Rockola 1937 World Series. And on the cases, so in addition to the book matched front panel, there's what's called lamb's tongue molding. So that specific pattern is lamb's tongue, and it's all the way along the bottom and all the way along the top. This case was completely stripped and refinished. There's decorative scrolls that are here on each side of the cabinet that I reproduced, and then they're sitting on legs, where the Rockola, they usually have a black painted base. They have casters underneath so they can be rolled around. And then there's an 1.5 inch wide strip of a bird's eye maple burl. The rest of the cabinet is veneered in walnut. And then there's a inlay or marquetry, however you pronounce it, that's actually a red striped oak inlay. So all of that I stripped and redid. It's all brand new. The proper way, or I should say most of the machines I've ever seen in Rockola, the sides are a straight, tight grain, where these two panels in the middle, they're still walnut, but it's a more open burl pattern in the two center sections. And then when you get to these outlying strips and then everything around the side, it's a nice straight grain, tighter pattern walnut. Where on the All-American, this cabinet is 100% mahogany. And it is a veneer. These pieces here are solid pieces of mahogany, but all the panels are made up of veneer. Now when I restored this one, interestingly enough, it came from Mike Munvy's, which that in itself is collectible. Mike Munvy's very popular arcade game distributor. So I had to leave that label and I painted around it. All-American just has a coin drop. You put the nickel in, it goes into the coin mech, and I go through this entire mechanism in another video. The difference here in Rockola is that you have an actual coin slide that when you push it in, it goes through a slug rejector, and your last nickel played is shown here, and then from previous 3 games is shown here. So you always see the last 4 nickels played, and then from there it drops into the coin box. The actual play field itself is identical between World Series and All-American. The obvious differences are in 1937 the players that you had versus 1929 through 31 the players that you had. But other than that, the two play fields could be swapped between machines. On All-American, the batter up and runs and hits are thin sheets of metal with lithograph paint and lettering on it. On World Series, they were paper, and these are in pretty bad shape. So I've reproduced them, and now that's on 10/1000ths of an inch polystyrene with printing on it, so they're much more durable than the original cardboard. Another difference in the play field is right here. On World Series you have 2 screws on each side, so this back panel or curved piece is locked into position onto these vertical rails by the 2 screws. That's World Series, whereas on All-American there's only a single screw, but if you look at this vertical piece with this back rail removed, you'll find there's an extra plate of metal that's tack welded, and that plate of metal is in such a position that it allows this to rest on it and hold it so it can't rotate, and then you just need the 1 screw on each side. The All-American baseball is on the left. World Series 1937 is on the right. The first difference we notice is in the frames themselves. This frame is cast aluminum, where the World Series is cast iron painted black, and it has much more open space to it. However, being cast iron, that frame by itself is much heavier than this cast aluminum one, even though it's more or less solid, a lot less holes in it. The motors are different in that how they mount onto the frame or the base. This has 4 mounts, and it's not really adjustable. You have to have just the right size belt in there. This one is 23.5 inches for this size pulley, where the frame on the World Series just has a slot, and this motor has 2 holes, and it is adjustable, so you can put a variety of belt sizes on here and then snug it up. The gearboxes both appear to be 100-to-1 gear reduction, although this was made by, looks like A-L-A-R-T, Allart. Can't quite make out that name. Where this gearbox was made by Ohio Gear in Cleveland, and it's got a number 1147, and it says right on it that it's 100-to-1 gear reduction. On World Series, if you look around the internet enough or look at enough pictures, you'll see examples of 1937 Rockola World Series where there is a big giant brass gear with a worm drive, and so it's probably still 100-to-1 gear reduction, but it's just a simple open worm gear. And so any that have these enclosed gearboxes that are full of the 90-weight gear oil are going to be much more reliable and durable, last longer than the open worm gear style. The bat assembly, where this will cock the bat and then this lets it go. This whole assembly on All-American is cast iron, where on the World Series it's cast aluminum. Other than that, all the individual pieces that go in it are pretty much identical. The casting itself is different. This handle release for the bat, when you push this down you swing it, this is a much thinner cast aluminum piece, where on the All-American it's a cast bronze piece, a little bit bigger and beefier. The main cam itself appears to be identical between All-American and 1937 World Series, although this does have stamped in it, and most of the pieces in the World Series have an AB and something stamped in, an AB and a number. This frame that the pitcher and umpire sit on appears to be the same between All-American and World Series. The ump and the ump's tube that the ball comes up through appears to be the same. A big difference between the two games is right here in the whole pitcher assembly. This is made out of pretty beefy cast bronze. Pretty good thick arm, where the World Series, it's cast aluminum, much thinner, a little more lightweight. Functionally does exactly the same thing. All the pieces, I don't know if any of these pieces would interchange between the two, but it's definitely a different piece. The cam here on the side with all the crazy shapes in it that adjusts the pitcher's position, that cam does appear to be the same between the two games. This entire assembly, from the strikes and balls and outs to the men on base, between All-American and World Series, functionally they do the exact same thing. They do it in the same exact way, but the individual components are different, where this chassis, or the main assembly, appears to be the same between the two games. This rocker arm assembly that sits on top is rolled and stamped metal with other metal tack welded on, and you can see that changes your batter up, and it also holds in place your balls and strikes, so that each time you cycle to get a new man on, this pivots and lets those balls clear out. But this being stamped metal, formed metal sheets, that contrast with this one on World Series, where this is all a cast aluminum piece, and then this is stamped metal that's screwed on. You can see what that does is it's got a finger right there that holds the balls from going away, and when this goes down it lets the balls get past it to clear it out. Same on this side. And then over here we have a thin copper blade that's pushing down to cycle the batter up. Where over here, again, it's formed metal. So same exact function all the way around, but Rockola changed it up in how they built their mechanism. The number of hits and runs and batter up assembly is almost identical between the two games. There's just some subtle differences where this is a formed metal plate that these two rods will rest on. In World Series, that is actually cast into that center piece. There are two troughs. One's right here for when the balls all leave the bases on, and another trough about halfway back. Those troughs actually are soldered in on All-American, where on Rockola, the World Series, they wised up and they put screws in and they mount them so that they're removable. And depending on what maintenance you have to do to this mechanism, you do have to remove those to be able to get to some things. This has a 191 stamped into it, and that matches here. So these pieces, this front part appears to be identical. This part for balls and strikes is almost identical. The casting seems to be the same, but the lever here and this plate on All-American is a little different, a little more beefier than in World Series. This is a thinner cast aluminum arm, and this is just a small cast aluminum piece into the main rod for the bat. On the All-American, the half circles where the balls go if they get past all of the outfielders. On All-American, there's two halves, an upper half and a lower half, and both of them are complete single pieces. So there's an upper half circle which is all one piece, and then a lower half circle, and so the split is right in between, but they're two full pieces. On World Series, Rockola changed it up where they split it right up the middle, and then this is solid, but you have a left hand side and a right hand side, and there is some differences here in the end from World Series to over here, All-American. Those differences are because of the different cabinet styles they fit in, and also the different backdrop or grandstands that go onto the game. These side panels are different. In All-American, the green in this panel exists because you don't see the cabinet at all, where on Rockola you have just this with the cover plate over it, and the side of the cabinet is seen, but the side of the cabinet is painted green. The instruction plate and the scoreboard plate are almost identical. The differences are that there's a lip down here at the bottom that is longer, and that is all that's on the bottom, where in World Series it's a very small lip, and then there's one more plate that goes in the front to come out to touch the front of the cabinet. The lower panels on World Series are now in place, and you can see the difference between that width and that width. The lower ball trough, which brings all the balls to the base hits, are identical between the two games. The upper bowl trough that takes care of the outs are almost identical. The World Series has a little bit more of a cutout here compared to All-American, which doesn't. And there's really nothing under here that would cause that to have a cutout. There's no difference between them when the playfield goes over the top, so not sure why that's different. And then in here there's a little bit of a depression in the casting to let the pitcher, the mechanism, get by. Other than that, they look almost identical. Electrically, in the main mechanism on Rockola, you have a coil here, and when you start the game, the coin escalator will push on this lever and lock a set of contacts so that the game can start. Current is delivered to the motor, but then when you get the third out and the ball from the third out goes down this and causes it to lower, it hits this micro switch. Hear that clicking? That micro switch then sends current to the coil, energizes, pulls in on an armature, and lets the contacts open. So it's an electric circuit that turns the game on and off, where here on All-American it's mechanical. When your third out causes this ball to drop, it raises this lever, which then will reset a switch that's here mechanically. I'll have the mechanism back together where I'll show you that in a minute. When a nickel is inserted in the coin chute, it goes down past the magnet, which would grab it if it was a slug or a washer, and then as it's going down this trough or down this channel, there's a finger that's inside here that's kicked out, and that finger is at such a height that if you look at the size of a nickel, dime, and penny, the nickel is the largest, and so the nickel will just grab the tip of that finger lever will just grab that nickel and tilt it outwards and cause it to take an alternate path, which drops it on that paddle, which releases this lever and causes this to go up, and that will close the contacts. So here we go, inserting a nickel. Mercury contact is now closed. The third out ball is presented here, and as it rolls to the other side, the weight causes it to tip down, which raises this lever, and then it's the tip of this lever right here that will push on this lever, which is in the back side of the coin mech, and it's sitting under here lifting up, and lifting this upwards will push this back down and reset that mercury switch. So I'll lift up, and then this locks in place and the contacts are open again. Game over. On the All-American baseball, what belongs right here between those two screws is a play counter. And so mine was missing the play counter. This is an example, but I've got another one with the ears that are on the front, as it should be. It mounts here on the front, and it's currently set to 0. It's a brand new meter. I'm going to mount that and then hook it up. There's a lever that gets pulled by a rod every time that mercury switch on that disc is rotated. So every time the disc rotates and the switch closes, that's pulling on the rod that increments your play counter. The Rockola does not have any sort of play meter on it, so you don't know how many plays it's had on it.
For more information, visit GameRoomRepair.com.